Welcome to another episode of our Personal Empowerment Premium Audio Series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is about character. Now, there's a long-standing argument about nature and nurture, like how much is genetic and how much is the environment we find ourselves in. But, when it comes to character, really that's sort of a third element. That's really about choice. That's the values you choose, the choices you make, the decisions you go. It comes down to, do I do bad or do I do good just for me or do I do good for me and everybody else? On what level do you make your choices and therefore develop your character?
It's an interesting word because character also has that definition of being sort of strange or odd. Gee, that guy's a real character, right? But I know what you're talking about. You're talking about ethics or morality or qualities. And I think, for me anyway, when I look at an individual's character, and I am judging, we all judge to some degree. We'll talk about that later, to what extent it's okay to judge people and what do you do with those judgments. I look first and foremostly at, is this person selfish or social in their orientation? Do they live in a me-centered world or a we-centered world? And I got to tell you, the narcissist, which seems to be getting increasingly popular, the me-centered, it's all about me kind of person, often is held up archetypically as the model for success, the person that has the drive to create the financial fortune and all the appearances of success. But the people that I really admire, and I bet you feel the same way, are those that are more we-oriented, and how successful they are financially seems to be less important than how prosperous they are in terms of friendships and relationships and the quality of character in that regard. We'll talk about a number of things today, but for me, Steve, that's where it begins.
Yeah, I actually look at it starting a step before that, and that is like, as simple as it, are they good or are they bad? I mean, before you get into like how are they good? Are they good just for themselves or are they good for other people? There are people who choose to be quote unquote bad, who for reasons maybe based on genetics, maybe based on environment, maybe based on neither or both, they choose to do evil. They choose to do bad things. They choose to hurt other people for their own personal gain, or sometimes just because it feels good to hurt other people. There's no real, it's like stepping on an ant. There's no real gain in it. Some people choose that. Usually, I'd guess because of bad parenting, but not always because of bad parenting. Good parents can have kids that turn out bad, or, bad parents can miraculously, a kid might turn out good. But
when you say feels good to hurt other people, that sounds almost like psychotic.
Yeah, right. There are people who become psychotic or I guess another word,
sociopathic or psychopathic.
Psychopathic and sociopathic, which I thought were different things, now seem to mean pretty much the same thing. And yeah, there is this no conscience. There's just nothing that says ouch inside when they hurt other people. I don't know if that is somewhat genetic or mostly environment. I don't know where that comes from, but there are people like that, and some of them are the greatest actors the world has ever seen. And you couldn't, they're just so good at acting normal that you really can't tell that they are these horrible monsters. So the first place you have to look for character, I think, is this a good person, a decent person? Is this, or does this person, is there something inside of you that's going, this alarm bell below your level of consciousness? Because we do resonate to evil in that way if we pay attention. Is there something inside that goes, there's something bad going on here? I need to watch out.
We ought to look at, since you brought it up, the different types of villains in literature. Like, I'm thinking between Scrooge and Darth Vader, and Snidely Whiplash, the villain that ties the damsel to the tracks while he twists his mustache, or
Sauron or Voldemort, you know.
there you go. That's some really dark stuff, and it sort of makes Scrooge look not so bad, right? He was just a selfish guy, and what is it with these guys? I guess it runs from, as you say, being really mentally ill. That's what a sociopathology or psychopathology really is. It's more than a personality disorder. It's a real psychosis.
A mental and emotional illness.
Yeah. And I don't think science has settled on what causes that. As you say, there may be some genetic predisposition. It may be we find out they were tortured in childhood or bullied, and then came back to extract some sort of revenge. I'm still trying to figure out Walter White, the character in Breaking Bad, you know, the high school science teacher that decides to open a meth lab. And my wife and I have gotten really addicted to watching that TV series, and it's dramatically really well written, but there is this strange undercurrent of, I mean, he's killing people right out of the gate, but it's sort of okay because the people he's killing are really bad people. So it's sort of like...
That's like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jamie Lee Curtis movie where she finds out he's a spy. Says, do you kill people? He goes, yeah, but they were all bad.
Or even the paradox of the Lone Ranger wearing a mask.
Of course, the Lone Ranger only shot guns out of people's hands. He never shot anybody in the body.
Well, that's Hollywood's spin on it. But I don't know, has anybody ever done? There must be books that... look at the great archetypes of evil in the different characters in literature. And again, the violence that we see for like a Voldemort or a Darth Vader really does make Scrooge look sort of minor by comparison.
Right, but you know, when you have a lot of Scrooges, that is, a lot of people who are just looking out for number one and really aren't taking care of anybody else. And in fact, they have a break-even consciousness in terms of money, and you know, as long as I have everything I need and everything I want, if I don't have anything left over, that's okay because I don't have to help my fellow human being. Enough Scrooges screw us up. I mean, really mess the world up. We need more and more people with a philosophy of philanthropy and prosperity, you know, to really heal the planet on a big picture. But the thing is, one individual who is like more warped than that, you know, like moving toward not the horrible monster, but an abuser, a child abuser, a spousal abuser, that sort of messed up. That's not usually considered to be a mental illness, although it's certainly borderlines on it. But that kind of behavior, the behind closed doors doing horrible things and then in front of the neighbors looking normal kind of thing, that's the kind of thing I think that is more potently dangerous in our society than the guy that gets on the tower and sniper kills 26 people or even the Scrooges. You know, that's what we have to watch out for. And we get into relationships, we get into business partnerships, we get into marriages with people that have that warp, that there's something missing, there's some love that didn't get fulfilled somewhere. And that's what we really have to tune ourselves into. That's where understanding character is so important, because, you know, knowing that we all can move in any direction, we need to watch and make sure the people we're with are moving in the same directions we are.
I remember watching an Oprah episode many, many years ago that involved a woman complaining initially about how verbally abusive and emotionally abusive, not physical, but very abusive emotionally and verbally, her husband was being, and he somehow, foolishly, from his point of view, agreed to participate in this, I don't know, makeover, I think Oprah called him. But they put a camera in their home for a week. And knowing that the camera was in the home, this guy continued his abusive behavior. And it wasn't until he was put on the set of the TV show and forced to watch edited clips from this movie of just how remarkably abusive he was to his wife, just unending. And looking at these cutaways of the wife and how it was impacting her and the toll that it was taking on her character. And, of course, he was humiliated by his own behavior. He was
He never
embarrassed.
saw him do that in his
Never.
mind. Yeah, it
He
was
had
like
no-
autopilot stuff.
And you could see that he is acting out abuse that was put on him by his parents.
Right. When you're really, really stressed, you really don't think, so you'll parent your children the way your parents parented you, because that's where the autopilot's set on. You don't think, you just do what's programmed in there.
I think even with spanking, you hear people saying the same thing. Well, it didn't harm me. Well, maybe it did, and that you're still beating up your kids.
Yeah, right.
maybe it did harm
Maybe there
you.
is some harm there, huh?
Right? What's the intention behind that? I don't believe the people that say, well, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. No, actually, you've already been hurt, and now you're extracting some bizarre form of justice. But it's perverse justice. It's not real justice to punish inappropriately because you were punished in that way, right?
Right, and that doesn't just necessarily mean corporal, getting hit kind of punishment. I mean, there's some guilt trips that are just way beyond the pale. There's some parents who make their children feel like not that they did a bad thing, but that they're generally a bad human being because of the bad thing that they did. So sometimes the kind of corrective, quote-unquote, punishment or discipline we get is so wrong, so doesn't fit the crime, so to speak, but yet that's what we got. That's what our parents did that for us, and that's what we do to them. And we have to be very, very careful about not continuing the legacy of inappropriate parenting, not evil parenting. Again, we're somewhere between Scrooge and Voldemort here. Parents who tell their kids not to risk disappointment, because they don't want them to hurt themselves. And that's bad parenting. If a kid doesn't risk disappointment, they become pessimists. They are afraid to dream, and they never try anything new. This is a horrible kind of. It's not evil parenting. It's just misguided. And so much of the bad choices we make, it's really not even a choice. It's a default choice. We're so stressed out we don't think. So the default choice is to do what we did, to do what our parents did, to do what's programmed in there, to do the autopilot thing, to just continue the legacy without thinking. So much of what this program has been about all these years, finding yourself in paradise, is finding the self that would know better. Go to a place where you're not stressed, paradise, and the self that emerges there, the quiet voice, the peace and love-based voice, knows what to do. It knows how to parent a child in a way that's loving. It knows to say that your behavior was wrong and there are ramifications for bad behavior, however you learn to put that, but not that you're bad. And that spanking or hitting or grabbing a child, hurting a child is not the right behavior. There's a part of us deep inside of us that knows this, that knows what's right to do, that knows the gentle, loving, kind thing, that has the best character choices available to us. If we quiet our mind and relax ourselves physically so we feel safe, then when there's a choice of doing bad, a choice of doing good just for yourself, or a choice of doing good for yourself and others comes up, the quiet voice, the self you find in paradise, chooses to do what's right for all concerned.
You say when the pressure's on, especially, we're most inclined to parent the way we were parented. And I think we can add business management in there in the same way. Managers tend to run their businesses the way they were parented.
Sure.
And so the models are essentially authoritarian, or what do you call? I call it progressive management. Sometimes it's total quality management. The idea of driving power down. I don't know if we've found a collective term for all of these new progressive management styles that are about empowering the individual. But certainly that's what parenting should be as well. The idea of empowering your child to be a strong individual of character is a very different model than you're my kid, you'll do what I say because I'm your father or I'm your mother. That's why, that's the because. Why? Because I say so. There is room for some authoritarianism in management and parenting, no question about it.
Need for some.
Yeah, sometimes you got to draw the line. Sometimes the kid or the employee may not understand. But you never want to give up that empathy. You always want to lead with, as we've said, to correlate the bad or good character with a me-centered or we-centered character. I think also requires us to take a look at the role of the most basic motivating factor, which is fear or love.
Right.
because fear divides and love unites. Fear creates the separate me-ness and the authority models, whereas love and understanding promotes the far superior we, good-oriented model. Come on, let's pull together and let's get this done. We can all do this for the greater good of all concerned. So I suppose there's a lot of room for in between, but these are the polarities at least.
Yeah, indeed, and that's where the choices of character come from. The fear-based choices are the ego choosing, and what the ego chooses to do is to move away from what feels bad, regardless of what direction it happens to be. And so if moving away from what feels bad, some kind of punishment, some kind of thing you don't want to experience, moves you toward doing bad, well, it's at least away from the bad feeling. So when ego takes over, sometimes we make decisions based on moving away from what we don't want that pushes us toward what we don't want, but it's the lesser of the evils, but it's still the evil. Whereas if we stop and realize that, on some level, everything's going to be okay. On some level, I'm going to get through this. This too will pass. But right now, I've got a serious, difficult choice to make, and I'm not going to make it out of fear. I'm going to make it out of love. So I'm going to take a moment here and just feel safe, take a deep breath, maybe even close my eyes. And now I'm going to listen to that other voice that is about moving toward what I do want. And it's about uniting and about love. And because what I do want is to be loved, lovable, and loving, and with other people and in relationships. My heart mind, when my fear voice is quiet, can move me toward what I do want. So that's where we have to make our character choices from. We don't want to make character choices from fear. We don't want to choose bad behaviors because we're moving away from something we don't want and just sort of stumble into this bad behavior kind of thing. What we want to do is realize when there's something we don't want, we have to stop, feel safe, to know that it's not what we have, it's what we don't want. It's something in the future. We don't have to be afraid of it right now. It's something in the future. Let's stop, and before we get there, or before we get deeper into there, then let's listen to the voice that feels safe and feels love and make those character choices about integrity and about doing the right thing from the place of feeling safe and feeling love.
So far, we've talked about this in sort of a psychological or sociological context. There is the overlay of religion, and what religion attempts to do, sometimes to even corner the market on character and these qualities, as if this is the exclusive purview of religion. Well, religion has a role in that, whatever the religion, there is this sense that creatures, human beings, are in the image of the Creator. There's the Creator, the creation, and it's populated by these creatures, and at the head of the food chain are these human beings, right? So we sort of turn that around, especially in the West, and tend to envision the Creator not as spirit, but as a giant man on a cloud, living very far away, very separated. And
White robe, big G on the pocket, that guy?
Totally. And I think it's unfortunate that this personification of divinity is really hurting religion, because I think it's one of the prime reasons that so many people are leaving the church is these old models, I'll say, in a space age where we've sent rockets out into space and we've put men on the moon 40 years ago, and we've still got these 2,000-year-old, 3,000-year-old images of divinity, the space gods. I was watching a program on the ancient astronauts and how likely it is that, we'll leave it to you to decide how likely it is, but all religions talk about these people coming from space in these fiery chariots, these spaceships, and they're referred to as gods. But my point here is, regardless of which religion we're talking about, if we are created in the image of something divine and perfect, then we have those wonderful qualities available to us. Why then would we behave in this way? Why, for example, would Christians for 2,000 years talk about love your enemy and then fight war? Or Jews talk about pounding their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and just like the Christians fight wars, and the Muslims. The Quran is full of references to peace and love and harmony, and yet they misinterpret jihad. There are these fundamentalist elements, these super orthodox elements in every religion that, I guess, make of it whatever they want it to be. They've always been fascinated by the difference between the idea of love in the Judeo-Christian Muslim model versus kindness in Eastern philosophy. And if love your enemy is difficult for you to understand, then consider that kindness is a quality of character that may be easier for you to adopt. If you don't know how to love somebody that you dislike or who's out to get you, then maybe you could at least be kind to them. That's basically Buddhism, Taoism, much of Hinduism is just based on the idea of being kind. They don't use the word love, though it tends to be used in the Abrahamic religions in a way that I think a lot of people just don't get. How do I love my enemy? At what point is love more than an emotion, some sort of spiritual force? At least, I'll admit, for me, I began to study Eastern philosophy and ethics and values. That word kindness just jumped out at me. I hadn't heard it nearly enough in my life.
Yeah, there's actually a sort of a version of the word love and kindness, loving and kindness together as a single word that sort of means that. And I think I remember hearing that word growing up.
I think in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, the Dalai Lama talks about loving kindness as if it were one word.
Yeah.
It's a hyphenated word.
Yeah, just as a kind of love or a kind of kindness. It's fascinating. Religions, all the religions basically have one same value, and that is that there's this higher being, and you better be good or else kind of thing. Although
I thought that was Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, he's one of them. But, the number of people that are actually believing there's a chance that they could go to a place called hell where there's a devil has gone down hugely dramatically over the decades. There's a very tiny percentage of people now, even those who consider themselves to be very, very Orthodox religious, that actually believe that there's even the tiniest possibility that they could go to a place called hell. So as a deterrent, it seems to me it's doing less good. But here's my issue. I think it's a wonderful concept that there is this belief that there's this reason to be good. Like, let's be good because you're being watched or whatever. But the thought that that's the only reason we be good is absurd to me. That people who say, oh, you have to have religion because people will just be bad if they didn't think that there was a God. That's absurd to me. We've proven that to be not true, actually. I mean, physiology, biology proves that to be not true. You take two people and you put them in a situation where they're hooked up to biofeedback, like a lie detector kind of thing, polygraph. And one person is telling the truth to a person they love, and one person is lying in a lie that would hurt a person they love. And these are not psychopathic people. These are just watch what happens to their physiology. The person who tells the truth, it's smooth, it's easy, it feels good, there's nothing stressful. The person who's telling the lie, the hurtful lie, their body goes berserk. The blood pressure goes up, and the heart beats faster, and the adrenaline flows through the system, and norepinephrine. I mean, all kinds of physiological changes that are saying, danger, 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 go. It's inherent in human beings to have a conscience. I mean, yes, there are exceptions we spoke about at the beginning, but it's inherent to want to do good, to want to be good. It's not that there's a God or a devil that we need to have to be good or bad. What there is, as Michael pointed out so eloquently earlier, there is love and fear. Those are the things. I mean, on some level, God is love and devil is fear. But that's real. For sure, that's real. There is this love stuff and there is this fear. Not that you could measure it, not that you could put it on a scale and weigh it, but they're absolutely, love and fear are real. And however we respond to those, whether we live our lives in one or the other, for the most part, is really the bottom line in terms of our character. That old story about, I have two wolves inside, one is love and one is fear. Well, which one wins the fight? Whichever one I feed, whichever one I pay most attention to. The philosophy of worry once, put a little energy into the bad stuff a little bit, but then spend most of your time thinking about what you do want so you feel safe. That's where you create better characters.
I think this is a real important point. You're talking about heaven and hell as a divine criminal justice system of punishment and retribution. Like Voltaire's line, if God did not exist, we'd have to invent it in our image, right? So the fear that we're basically bad causes us to have these prisons. And I don't want to get off into a tangent about better alternatives to prison, but I think most people cynically have given up the idea of rehabilitation. Prison now is simply punishment. We've pretty much given up on these 20th century concepts of rehabilitation. And I'm sure they'll be revisited as we evolve, as we become more human, more humane. We will recognize that while in most cases there are no excuses for a person's criminal behavior, there are reasons for their criminal behavior, and we can rehabilitate and reform many, maybe most, if not all. I'd admit that. It's quite possible. Some are, as we discussed earlier, sociopathic or criminally minded and ought to be in hospitals rather than jails. Hospitals with bars, but nevertheless, it's so strange to me that we even put drug addicts in prison. Why don't we put them in hospitals? So in any event, I don't think we can underscore this enough. We really need to emphasize the fact that we have scientific evidence that to behave immorally, unethically, to be a person of bad character, to, as Steve said, to simply lie, causes all these negative physical reactions in the body. It creates illness and sickness and, at the very least, confusion and ignorance, and that causes us to tell more lies and pursue the false path even more. And Steve and I are both suggesting that we don't really need these external ideas like heaven and hell or, third strike and we're going to throw away the key and keep you locked up in prison forever. We could and we can, as parents, as a society in general, engender the conscience that knows the difference. Now, you don't hear much about this on the evening news or current events magazines. People don't talk about conscience very much. In fact, the word gets confused with conscious and consciousness. It's even spelled oddly, as if science is a part of it. Conscience is C-O-N, science. Conscience is that Jiminy Cricket part of us, that you may have two wolves within you, as Steve says. You may have a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. It's much more accurate to think of the world as made up not of good people and bad people, but of people that have both polarities within them, the tendency to respond to love and to respond to fear. And we are that consciousness that can choose between love and fear. And the conscience is the part, I think, evidence of divinity within all human beings that says the love is superior to the fear. The kindness is superior to the hatred. And to talk about this on that level, I think, is a little unusual, but really needed. I don't know who's going to pick up this theme. Again, I don't expect the media to begin to talk about the inherent goodness in people and that conscience is evidence that while we have the potential to be good and bad, the tendency is toward goodness, especially if we cultivate that at an early age. Where do we pick that up? If the parents don't have it and the schools are not allowed to do it, often it falls on businesses. And I don't think that ought to be the purview of business to teach character to their employees, but often they have to. By default, falls to them.
Right. If they hadn't been exposed to it before that's the first place, then that's where it has to happen. So at some point, we have choices that we're faced with. And it often comes down to, do I do bad to look good? Or do I risk looking bad to do good? It often comes down to appearances out there, what other people will think of you, and on a deep level, what you'll think about yourself. So when you're fear-based, when you're afraid of what's going to happen, when you're focused on worry in your life, then you're likely to make the choice based on, I don't want to look bad, so I'm going to move away from that in whatever direction it takes me, even if it takes me into bad stuff. But if you're willing to say, okay, look, I do care what other people think about me, but I get first vote, and what I think of me is the most important, and how I feel about myself is more important. So I'm going to, what am I going to be happy living with? The momentary discomfort I may face by looking bad right now versus this thing inside of me that I have to be with for the rest of my life. And that's where I think if we get down to that core kind of place, we choose integrity, we choose being good, we choose doing good. And we choose good for the right reasons, not just because it doesn't feel bad, just because it does good for us and for all concerned. And the bigger picture becomes much clearer when we get down into that relaxed and deep state. So, on a day-to-day basis, it's not that easy to go down and get into that deep, deep quality place where you can find out what your core values are, but it's not something you have to do every day. It's something you have to do when you're facing the big stuff, when there's crisis or when there's huge opportunity, and something big is on the horizon. Then that's where you want to dig down deep and go really inside of yourself and make the choice that's based on delayed gratification, on seeing the bigger picture, on doing good for more people, on something that you'll be happy living with. One of my favorite exercises, lots of self-improvement programs have done things like this, where you imagine yourself at the end of your life, looking back over your life, and, what are you happy with? What do you regret? And that sort of thing. What I'm really looking at is, it's okay if I don't do things that I could have done. That would have been nice, but that I didn't really do anything to hurt people. That's really what I want to be able to. I want to look back and say, I made some mistakes and people might have gotten hurt, but when it came down to the choices I made, I never chose to actually hurt people, and that to me is the core of what character is all about.
We need to talk about materialism a little bit too. I have some thoughts on this, especially given, again, the simplistic way that media portrays, the Occupy Wall Street movement, for example. These people are chanting, "We are the 99%. We're the good guys." Well, that makes the 1% the bad guys. Why are they bad? And the 1% says, well, we're bad in your eyes only because we're successful and we're prosperous and we're rich. And this is class warfare. And the 99% say, funny you should mention it. I thought we were the victims of your class warfare. I don't think it's capitalism that's being debated here. And I really don't think it's about rich versus poor here. Everybody wants to have more money than they have, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being financially prosperous and enjoying abundance. I think the question is, what are the values, or our theme today, the character behind what you do with the money that you have? What are you going to do with that? Are you going to use it only to make more money, to buy more stuff, to garner more power around the meanness rather than the we-ness? Or are you going to use that capital as seeds to create prosperity for other people, to really be job creators, to loan money like the micro-lending movement that we're beginning to see in the third world, to empower other people, to spread the wealth around, not in a silly way. I mean, there's room for charity, and then there's also a point where charity becomes just some sort of welfare state that ends up undermining and eroding character. So it's a balance. This is like the third way we see in Eastern philosophy. How do we balance spirituality with materialism? How do we learn to live in the world but not of it? To enjoy our financial prosperity and our wealth and create more of it in a way that is in harmony with our spiritual and ethical values, our responsibility to each other. That phrase about being your brother's keeper, well, you may not be your brother's keeper, but you nevertheless have a responsibility to help him and her, right? If you have more bread than you could possibly eat, and this person is starving, why wouldn't you share the loaf and find some productive, positive, creative, loving way to share that loaf without creating a permanent dependency? This is the balance that the left and right doesn't seem to want to find, right? We can, as progressive individuals, for example, call for social justice all we want, but that's not enough if we have difficulty explaining the means of bringing that about. Again, I think charity is a wonderful word, and philanthropy is a responsibility that prosperous people have. But there is a point where that creates a reliance or a dependency. You know that old proverb about better to teach a person to fish than to give him fish? So while charity is a wonderful thing, maybe we should be charitable with our education and with our training and with teaching more self-reliance and more independence, and expand our view of what it means to be charitable in that regard.
It's really, really important. You know, some children are just blessed with parents that really have clearly defined character values and share them with their children. But so many kids, you know, their parents didn't get good role models themselves, and they aren't very good role models. And that's where I think our school system has to come in. I'm not talking about teaching religion in school. Clearly, a separation of church and state is in everybody's best interest, but I'm talking about teaching character in school. You know, more important maybe than math and science and history is like integrity and honesty and kindness. You know, I'd be much more concerned if a child of mine came home having had a fight than having gotten a D. You know, I mean, so there's some great character programs out there that are teaching character techniques in schools. And one of my very favorite is the Quantum Learning Network, 8 Keys of Excellence. They do a wonderful job of training children, you know, elementary, junior high, high school kids, to live with character, to live in the moment, to be honest, to live in integrity, to say what they mean, to speak with good purpose. There's specific things to do to be in your integrity, to have good character. And I think we need to lay those things out. School needs to be a role model for our children, not only in terms of how their minds work, but also how their hearts work, their way they treat each other. You know, this is a great experimental zoo for us to have our children come together, meet each other, and learn to interact in loving and kind and generous and philanthropic ways. So I'm a big fan of teaching values, of teaching, you know, character to our children in school. And I think that's as a big a part of our education as the reading, writing, and the arithmetic.
Yeah, and again, to get back to the idea of love and fear, love vanquishes fear. It's so much like the polarities of light and dark or hot and cold, where they appear to be opposites in terms of language, but in fact, light is an energy and darkness is just the absence of the energy. And the same thing with heat. It's a real energy. It's a thing. It exists. It behaves according to certain laws. Whereas cold is not a force or an energy. It's just the absence of heat. And when we understand that fear and ignorance is the absence of love and understanding, then obviously you want to get on the side of the love and understanding. So we can talk about character, ethics, values, mores as qualities of love. And again, kindness, respect, dignity, humility, generosity, tolerance, patience, even wisdom, truth, and beauty. These are all qualities of love that we have within us. It's part of the conscience. It's part of our consciousness. Many would say it's the essence of who we are. Beyond our bodies, beyond our thoughts, beyond our feelings is conscious awareness that we are these loving values. And that's the character that's inside everybody. Fear promotes the opposite polarity, the ego, the scary part, the part that then is inclined to be selfish or to counsel evil, but just don't agree, refuse to feed that wolf. and recognize that everybody's got that shadow side, as Jung called it. Stop dividing the world into good people and bad people and see this potential to go either way in everyone, including, especially, in you. And I think that'll help us to be a model then for what we want other people to be as well.
You know, Michael, in that wonderful riff you just did on the qualities of love, you named almost all the 8 keys of excellence. But let me go over them there because they're really kind of cool. The 8 keys are integrity, failure leads to success, speak with good purpose, this is it, meaning live in the moment, commitment, ownership, flexibility, and balance. Those are the 8 keys of excellence taught by Quantum Learning Network to lots and lots of schools around the country. A wonderful character program. We need to teach our children about how to make the right choices, and these are great programs to do that. And the place to do that is inside yourself, in this place we call paradise, a state of narrow awake, the alpha brainwave state, the zone, the flow, whatever you want to call it. It's a wonderful place where love speaks and fear quiets down. So it starts with closing your eyes and taking a really deep breath, filling your lungs all the way full and holding at the peak. And as you release, relax and find inside your mind your quiet place of peace. A place that feels so nice, you call it paradise. Relax, release, and experience the peace.
Remember always that the best parts of you become available, increasingly accessible, as you feel safer. As you begin to consciously cultivate a sense of relaxation in your body, and you feel muscular tension, even now, falling away, so safe and so relaxed. With your eyes closed, you must be safe. The slow, deep breathing, you must be feeling safe. And that nightmare of fear and confusion representing what you do not know and do not understand vaporizes, it disappears. It was only a specter or a phantom of your confusion. It's replaced by feeling safe and slowing down the mind and calming the emotional nature to access peace and love. Not merely emotional love, but love as understanding, as truth, as wisdom, as those powerful insights that arrive with a sense of confirmation. When truth comes through in your life and you get those lid-lifting bursts of awareness, aha! That's it. As if your mind, and sometimes it feels as if your whole body is flooded with light, love and light, revealing the understanding that had been there all along but was hidden in the shadows, disguised by your fears and your confusion, but now is obvious. There it is. That's the answer. That's the way to behave. Ha ha! And it was here all along.
It was here all along, because when you're feeling safe, one thing that's always true is you know exactly what's right for you to do, what's right for your heart, what's right for your soul. The answer comes to you as one, as a whole. You just know. You just feel what you need to know or how to deal. It just comes through. When you feel safe, you know what's right for you to do. So remember to make your choices from these safe and loving voices that you hear in a place free of fear. Remember to make your choices when you're listening to these voices, when you're here in a place free of fear. So choose your character, your ethics, your values, the morality that you choose to live, based on a place where you're feeling safe and free to give, to feel a whole with humanity, to feel safe and to feel free. Allow yourself to let your character come from this place. Let it be. Choose your character decisions from this place of love, where you're fear-free. This place of love. This is the place to be.
Reminding yourself that there's never any loss in giving. Giving promotes receiving. It's no sacrifice at all to move from me-centered to we-centered, because you're part of the we. To move your attention from the separated self to an awareness of the greater good is to recognize the understanding that you're part of that greater good. The rewards are many, beginning with a sense of fulfillment, contentment, the meaning and sense of purpose that everyone longs for in their lives. And so feel that now. It takes no effort. Instead, especially in these states, it requires merely turning your attention to how it feels to be kind and respectful and to love life, to love other people, even those that don't seem to like you, to love them anyway. That doesn't mean you need to tolerate their abuse. You just don't have to hang around with them. You can have some compassion, some pity for the fact that they're going through difficult times. We all do. It's guaranteed in life. Everyone has their trials and tribulations. Empathize. That's a good place to begin. Respect. If you can't love your enemy, respect your enemy. Treat everyone with a sense of dignity. And notice the benefits to you. The inseparable benefits of serving humanity. Just helping out. Just being oriented toward a you and me world. Better and better. Onward and upward. In the image of that which is good and kind and loving and some would argue even divine. And notice that without any effort whatsoever, you can bring these qualities with you, this feeling, this sensibility with you back into the wide awake state. As you reorient yourself now, remembering what you'll see in just a few moments when you open your eyes, take a nice, slow, deep breath, fill your lungs, hold for a beat, and now as you exhale, open your eyes, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine, refreshed, better than before.
Yeah, it comes down to love, fear. It comes down to love promotes kindness and fear promotes meanness. And, those are the kind of like two ends of the spectrum, being kind or being mean. Well, if there's somebody out there who's mean and you're mean to them, you'll probably get mean back. If you're kind to them, you might get mean back, you might get kind back, but your better shot is with kindness. Either way, being kind to mean people, being kind to kind people, kind works better than mean. Either way, for you and for humanity. And so when there's a choice between being kind and being mean, that's where character comes in. That's where you make your choice, You can be scared and still behave kindly. You don't have to behave in a mean way under any circumstances. Even if you're terrified, if you have character, then you don't fight prejudice with prejudice. You don't fight bigotry with bigotry. You fight ignorance with understanding as best as you can, and you be kind. That's just the bottom line of character, I think, is choose to be kind.
Understanding is a fascinating word. I have a little game I play sometimes with that word where I ask myself, if I'm understanding, or in order to be understanding, what am I going to stand under? And there's a concept in philosophy called the rain cloud of knowable things. It's sort of a philosophical version of being inspired by God or Jesus or Krishna
or the muse.
Yeah, whatever your sense of divinity. The rain cloud of knowable things is if wisdom, truth, and understanding precipitates down, okay? And you have to stand under it, right? You just have to move yourself to orient yourself to be open and receptive to your better nature, whether you see it as divine or just developing your personality. It's in everybody's interest for us to, on a daily basis, reorient yourself. And the best way to do that is breathing, closing your eyes, and using these reflective, introspective, gosh, there's so many names for it, meditative or contemplative states. And that's why we include them as part of every single one of these personal empowerment programs. To empower yourself is to stand open and receptive to your better nature. It's really that simple. We're moving into a brand new year as we record this. We're at the end of 2011, approaching 2012. Of course, we don't know when in time you're listening to this, but we want to wish you a happy new year anyway as we move into 2012. It's a year of great promise. Every year is. That's why years are nice. You turn the page, you say, well, now I get a fresh start. I'm going to make some new resolutions and maybe even some revolutions. This is a special year, though. Many people have been saying for a long time that 2012, according to some very old prophecies, is a time when some sort of critical mass is reached in terms of a significant percentage of human beings understanding the very concepts that we discuss in this program week after week. So if you know people who share your interest in personal empowerment, in developing themselves to be the best that they can be, tell them about this series. You can forward the newsletter you get each week with a link at the bottom of the newsletter. You can use the tool on the Focused Passion page to forward examples or samples of these programs to your friends. And in that way, do them a kindness. You'll benefit, we'll benefit, the world will benefit. This is important information. In many ways, what we're doing is offering people that which they already have. It's not like I've got something you need. Everybody already has wisdom. but they're not sure how to access it. And people find themselves living in a really scary world, and those fears or shadows that tend to get in the way. So it's as simple as learning to relax, and the rest, just some seed thoughts to help you orient yourself. So would you pass it on? Would you pay it forward? And make it a resolution of yours as we move into the new year to spread the word. Hey, there's this information and this book and these webinars and these premium audio programs, and share what you are discovering about your potential and the potential everybody has to accelerate their growth, to be better and better every day in every way.
Happy New Year, and as a New Year's resolution, relax your mind and you'll be kind.
As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.